The village of Varkolac had always lived in the shadow of the Carpathian mountains, where mist clung to the valleys like the breath of something long dead. It was a place where old superstitions were not mere folklore, but survival, where crosses hung above every doorway and garlic braids adorned every threshold. The people of Varkolac knew better than to question the old ways. They had seen what happened to those who did. Elena Moreau stood before the cracked mirror in her family's modest cottage, her hands trembling as she fastened the white lace collar around her throat. The fabric felt like a noose. Tonight was the night of the mating ceremony, an ancient tradition that drew noble suitors from distant lands to claim brides from among the village's unmarried daughters. Her mother had insisted she wear white, as if purity could be advertised like wares at market. "You look beautiful," her mother said from the doorway, though her voice carried no joy. "Just remember, Elena, smile, be gracious. Our family depends on this." Elena met her mother's eyes in the mirror's reflection. Her mother's face had aged years in mere months, lines of worry etched deep around her mouth and eyes. Since her father's injury in the mines, they had been surviving on charity and thin soup. A good match tonight could save them all from destitution, or it could condemn Elena to a loveless marriage with a stranger. "I understand," Elena whispered, though understanding and acceptance were not the same thing. Her younger sister Maria burst into the room with the thoughtless energy of a 12-year-old who did not yet comprehend the weight of such ceremonies. She carried a crown of white roses that the village elder had blessed that morning. "You will be the most beautiful one there," Maria declared, placing the crown carefully atop Elena's dark hair. "All the nobles will want to choose you." Elena forced a smile for her sister's sake, but her heart felt like lead. She had heard the stories whispered among the village women, tales of girls who went to the ceremony and never returned, or who came back changed, hollow-eyed and silent. Some said the nobles who attended were not merely wealthy landowners, but creatures of darkness who wore human skin like a disguise. Others claimed the ceremony itself was cursed, a bargain struck generations ago to keep the village safe from supernatural predators. Old Magda, the herb woman who lived at the edge of the forest, had warned Elena 3 days prior when she came to purchase feverfew for her father's pain. The crone had gripped Elena's wrist with surprising strength and stared into her eyes with an intensity that made Elena's blood run cold. "You have a light in you, girl," Magda had rasped, "the kind that draws moths and monsters alike. When you go to the ceremony, keep your eyes down. Do not meet the gaze of the one in black. He has been waiting a very long time." Elena had dismissed the warning as the ravings of a lonely old woman who spent too much time alone with her herbs and her cats. But now, as twilight descended and the church bells began to toll, she found herself remembering those words with a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Her father called from the main room, his voice weakened by pain and laudanum. "Elena, come here before you go." She found him in his chair by the cold hearth, his legs stretched out before him, still wrapped in bandages from the accident that had crushed bone and ended his livelihood. He had been a strong man once, a coal miner with hands like iron and a back that never bent. Now he looked shrunken, diminished, a ghost of his former self. "Papa," she said softly, kneeling beside his chair. He took her hand in his, and she felt the tremor in his fingers. "I am sorry," he said, and tears gathered in his eyes. "I am sorry you must do this. If I were whole, if I could still work, you would be free to choose your own path." Elena squeezed his hand. "You have nothing to apologize for. Accidents happen. This is not your fault, but it is my failure," he insisted. "A father should provide for his daughters, not sell them to strangers." "You are not selling me," Elena said firmly, though they both knew it was a kind lie. "The ceremony is tradition. Every family participates." He studied her face for a long moment, and she saw in his eyes the same fear she felt in her own heart. "If any man mistreats you, if you are unhappy, you come home. I do not care if he is the richest lord in Transylvania. You come home and we will find another way." She kissed his weathered cheek, tasting salt. "I will," she promised, knowing it was another lie. Once chosen, a girl could not simply walk away. The ceremony bound more than just hearts. It bound fates. Outside, the village square had been transformed. Torches blazed in iron sconces, casting dancing shadows across the cobblestones. A raised platform had been erected in the center, draped in black velvet and surrounded by white candles that flickered in the evening breeze. The air smelled of incense and something else, something older and darker that Elena could not name. The unmarried women of the village were gathering, 23 girls between the ages of 16 and 25, all dressed in white as tradition demanded. They clustered together like sheep sensing wolves nearby, their faces pale and their hands clasped. Elena recognized most of them. There was Irina, the blacksmith's daughter, who had always been kind to Elena. Beside her stood the twins, Anna and Elena, whose father owned the village's only mill. And there, trying to appear brave but failing, was young Sophie, barely 16 and already terrified. Elena took her place among them, and Irina reached out to squeeze her hand. "We will be all right," Irina whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. "They say some of the nobles are quite handsome." "Handsome wolves are still wolves," muttered Anna darkly. The village elder, Father Vasile, emerged from the church in his ceremonial robes, carrying an ancient leather-bound tome that was said to contain the original covenant. He was a man of perhaps 60 years, with a long white beard and eyes that had seen too many of these ceremonies, too many girls traded like livestock. He mounted the platform and raised his hands for silence. "People of Varkolak," he intoned, his voice carrying across the square. "We gather once more beneath the full moon to honor the ancient covenant. As it was in the beginning, so it shall be until the end. We offer our daughters to the lords of the mountain, and in return, our village is protected from the darkness that dwells beyond the forest." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Protected from what, exactly, was never specified, but everyone knew. The stories of the creatures that prowled the mountains were not mere superstition. There were nights when howling filled the valleys, nights when shadows moved with purpose and hunger. The ceremony was the price of safety, or so they told themselves. "Let the lords come forth," Father Vasile commanded. From the darkness beyond the torchlight, they came. 6 figures, all men, all dressed in finery that spoke of wealth and power. They moved with a predatory grace that made Elena's instincts scream danger. Their faces were handsome, aristocratic, pale in the firelight, but their eyes reflected the flames like those of cats, and when they smiled, Elena could have sworn she glimpsed fangs. The first was a tall man with golden hair and a smile that did not reach his eyes. He scanned the gathered women with the casual interest of a man selecting fruit at market. The second was darker, with black hair and a scar across his cheek that somehow made him more striking. The third and fourth were clearly brothers, both with auburn hair and matching expressions of bored amusement. The fifth was older, perhaps 50, with silver streaking his temples and an air of weary cruelty. But it was the sixth who made Elena's breath catch in her throat. He stood apart from the others, as if even they gave him deference. He was taller than any man she had ever seen, with broad shoulders draped in a black cloak that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His hair was black as a raven's wing, falling to his shoulders in waves that framed a face of such stark, terrible beauty that Elena felt her heart stutter. His features were sharp, aristocratic, almost cruel in their perfection. His skin was pale as marble, and his eyes were the color of blood and darkness combined. He did not look at the women, not at first. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the mountains, as if this entire ceremony bored him beyond measure. Elena tried to look away, tried to keep her eyes downward as old Magda had warned, but something compelled her. Some invisible thread seemed to connect her to this dark stranger, pulling at her attention like the moon pulls the tides. The ceremony proceeded with ritual formality. Father Vasile read from the ancient tome, words in a language older than Latin, older than memory. The women were called forward one by one to stand upon the platform, displayed like prize mares, while the nobles circled and considered. The golden-haired lord chose Irina, claiming her with a touch to her shoulder, and a smile that made Elena's stomach turn. The scarred one selected Anna, who went pale but did not resist. The brothers chose 2 of the prettier village girls, and the silver-haired lord took Sophie, whose tears he ignored with cold indifference. Elena's name was called. Her legs felt like water as she climbed the steps to the platform. The remaining nobles circled her, and she could feel their eyes on her skin like physical touches. The white dress suddenly felt transparent, inadequate. She kept her gaze fixed on the wooden planks beneath her feet, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "Look up," commanded the voice of one of the unchosen lords. She obeyed, lifting her eyes, and found herself staring into the cruel face of a heavy-set man with thick lips and small pig-like eyes. He smiled, revealing yellowed teeth, and reached out to touch her hair. "This one will do nicely," he said. Elena's skin crawled, but she remained still, knowing resistance was futile. This was her fate. This was the price her family required. She would endure it. She would survive it. Somehow. Though the single word cut through the night like a blade, Elena turned, as did everyone in the square, toward the source of that voice. The man in black had finally moved. He was walking toward the platform with a slow, deliberate stride that spoke of absolute confidence and absolute power. The other nobles stepped back without being asked, clearing a path for him as subjects might for a king. Father Vasile's face went ashen. "My Lord Dracula," he stammered, "I did not think any of these simple girls would interest you. Forgive me, I did not mean to waste your time." Dracula. The name sent ice through Elena's veins. Everyone in Transylvania knew that name. It was whispered in the same breath as prayers and curses. The Lord of Shadows, the Impaler, the undying Count Dracula. He could not be here. He could not be real. But he was mounting the platform now, and the weight of his presence made the air itself feel heavy. The pig-eyed lord who had claimed Elena backed away with a speed that would have been comical under different circumstances. "I did not realize, my lord," he babbled. "I meant no offense. She is yours, of course." Dracula did not even glance at him. His eyes were fixed solely on Elena, and as his gaze met hers, she felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Those eyes were ancient and terrible and beautiful, filled with centuries of pain and hunger, and something else, something she could not name, but that called to her soul like a lament. She tried to look away and found she could not. She tried to breathe and found the air too thin. The torchlight seemed to dim, and the sounds of the square faded to a distant roar. There was only him, only those eyes that saw into her, through her, past every wall she had ever built around her heart. He stepped closer, so close she could smell him. Sandalwood and old books and something metallic that her mind did not want to identify as blood. He raised one pale hand, and she saw that his fingers were long and elegant, the nails perfectly manicured. He reached toward her face, and every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee, to do anything but stand there. But she could not move. His fingertips brushed her cheek, cold as marble, gentle as a prayer. She felt her knees buckle, felt the strength leave her body as if he had commanded it to go. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was his face, those terrible, beautiful eyes widening with something that might have been surprise or recognition or hunger. Then she was falling, and the world went black. When consciousness returned, she found herself cradled in arms of iron strength and impossible cold. Her head rested against a chest where no heartbeat sounded. The scent of sandalwood and death surrounded her. She opened her eyes and found herself staring up into the face of Count Dracula. "I have you," he said, and his voice was like velvet over steel, beautiful and terrible. "You are safe now." But as Elena looked into those ancient, hungry eyes, she knew that safety was the last thing she would ever be again. Helena's first thought upon waking was that she had died and gone to some strange afterlife caught between heaven and hell. The ceiling above her was painted with frescoes of angels and demons locked in eternal combat, their faces twisted in agony and ecstasy. Candlelight flickered across the images, making them seem to move, to breathe, to watch her with accusing eyes. Her second thought was that she was lying in the most luxurious bed she had ever seen, surrounded by silk pillows and velvet blankets the color of deep wine. The mattress beneath her felt like resting on clouds, so different from the thin straw pallet in her family's cottage that for a moment she forgot to be afraid. Then memory returned in a rush. The ceremony, the man in black, those terrible, beautiful eyes, the feeling of falling, of being caught, of cold arms holding her as consciousness fled. She sat up too quickly and the room spun. A wave of dizziness forced her to grip the edge of the bed, breathing slowly until the world steadied. She was still wearing the white dress from the ceremony, though someone had removed her shoes and the crown of roses from her hair. The roses now sat in a crystal vase on the bedside table, already wilting despite the cool air. The room itself was a study in Gothic opulence, stone walls hung with tapestries depicting hunting scenes and medieval battles. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, though no fire burned within it. Tall windows with leaded glass panes showed only darkness beyond, and Elena had no idea if it was still night or if the windows simply faced away from the sun. An ornate wardrobe stood against another wall, its doors carved with images of wolves and bats and other creatures of the night. She slid from the bed on unsteady legs, her bare feet meeting cold stone floor. A thick carpet runner provided some warmth as she made her way to the nearest window. She pressed her face against the glass, trying to see where she was, but the darkness outside was absolute, as if the window opened onto the void itself. A soft knock at the door made her spin around, her heart hammering. "Enter," she called, though her voice came out smaller than she intended. The door opened to reveal a woman of perhaps 40 years, dressed in a simple black gown with a white apron. Her face was kind but careworn, and her eyes held a deep sadness that seemed permanently etched into her features. She carried a silver tray laden with food and a crystal decanter of dark red liquid that Elena desperately hoped was wine. "Good evening, Miss Elena," the woman said with a slight curtsy. "I am Mrs. Kovacs, the housekeeper. The master instructed me to see to your needs. You have been asleep for nearly a full day and night." "A full day?" Elena's hand went to her throat. "Where am I? Where is my family? I need to send word that I am well." Mrs. Kovacs set the tray on a small table near the fireplace and began arranging the items with practiced efficiency. "You are in Castle Dracula, miss. Your family has been informed of your safe arrival and has been compensated generously for your service. As for sending word, the master will discuss all such matters with you when he rises." "When he rises?" Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold stone. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Kovacs would not meet her eyes. "The master keeps unusual hours, miss. He sleeps during the day and walks at night. It is his way." "Because he is a vampire," Elena said flatly, surprised by her own boldness. The housekeeper's hands stilled on the wine decanter. She finally looked at Elena, and the pity in her eyes was answer enough. "You should eat, miss. You will need your strength. The master wishes to dine with you tonight." "Dine," Elena repeated, and hysteria bubbled up in her throat like poison. "Will I be the main course?" Mrs. Kovacs crossed the room with surprising speed and gripped Elena's shoulders firmly, but not unkindly. "Listen to me, girl. You are not the first woman to come to this castle, and you will not be the last. I have served the master for 20 years, and in all that time, he has never killed anyone within these walls without cause. Frightened, yes, tested, certainly, but not killed. If he wanted you dead, you would not have woken in silk sheets." "Then what does he want with me?" Elena whispered. The housekeeper released her and stepped back. "That is between you and him, but I will tell you this much. Something about you affected him at that ceremony. I have never seen him claim a bride before. Never in 2 decades. He always watches from the shadows and then leaves alone. But you, he saw you and could not look away. That makes you either very fortunate or very cursed, and I have not yet decided which." She moved back to the tray and began lifting silver domes to reveal the food beneath. Roasted chicken with herbs, fresh bread still warm from the oven, cheese and fruit and pastries that looked like they belonged in a king's palace. The smell made Elena's stomach growl despite her fear. "When did you last eat, miss?" Elena tried to remember. The morning of the ceremony, perhaps. Her mother had insisted she eat something, though nerves had stolen her appetite. More than a day ago now. "Then eat, Mrs. Kovacs commanded. Whatever happens tonight, you will face it better with food in your belly. And drink the wine. It will calm your nerves." Elena wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some semblance of defiance, but hunger won out over pride. She sat at the small table and began to eat, and once she started, she found she could not stop. The food was exquisite, better than anything she had ever tasted. The wine was rich and smooth, warming her from the inside. Mrs. Kovacs watched her with approval. "Better," she said. Now the master has requested that you dress for dinner. The wardrobe contains gowns in your size. Choose whatever pleases you. Elena paused with a piece of bread halfway to her mouth. How does he know my size? The housekeeper's expression became carefully neutral. The master is very observant, miss. Now I will return in 1 hour to escort you to the dining hall. I suggest you prepare yourself. She left before Elena could ask any more questions, the door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded like a prison cell locking. Elena finished her meal in silence, her mind racing. She was a prisoner in a vampire's castle, claimed by the most feared creature in all of Transylvania, and no one was coming to save her. Her family had been paid off. The village would forget her. She was alone with a monster who kept unusual hours and made housekeepers speak in riddles. She should be terrified. She was terrified. But beneath the fear, something else stirred: curiosity, anger, and, though she hated to admit it, a strange fascination with the man who had looked at her, as if she were the only person in the world who mattered. She rose and went to the wardrobe, opening the carved doors to reveal a collection of gowns that took her breath away, silk and velvet and brocade in every color imaginable, though black and deep red dominated. Each dress was a work of art, clearly made by master tailors, and all, as Mrs. Kovacs had said, appeared to be exactly her size. She selected a gown of midnight blue velvet with silver embroidery at the bodice and sleeves. It was beautiful but not too ostentatious, elegant but not seductive. She would meet this Count Dracula on her own terms with her dignity intact. A small door she had not noticed before led to a bathing chamber with a copper tub already filled with steaming water. Rose petals floated on the surface, and the scent of lavender filled the air. Servants had prepared this, servants she had neither seen nor heard. The thought unsettled her, but the promise of hot water after 2 days was too tempting to resist. She bathed quickly, washing away the grime and fear and confusion. The hot water soothed muscles she had not realized were tense. For a few precious minutes, she let herself pretend this was all a strange dream, that she would wake in her own bed with Maria shaking her shoulder and the morning sun streaming through the cottage windows. But the water grew cold, and reality remained stubbornly present. She dried herself with towels softer than anything she had ever known, and dressed in the blue gown. It fit perfectly, hugging her curves in a way that made her feel both beautiful and exposed. There was a looking-glass in the corner, tall and framed in silver, and she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She looked older somehow, less like a village girl and more like someone who belonged in a castle. The thought disturbed her more than it should have. Mrs. Kovacs returned exactly 1 hour later, as promised. She looked Elena up and down and nodded approvingly. "Very suitable, miss. The master will be pleased. Follow me, please." They left the room and entered a corridor of stone and shadow. Torches burned in sconces along the walls, but their light seemed swallowed by the darkness, creating pools of illumination separated by gulfs of black. Their footsteps echoed on the stone floor, and Elena could swear she heard other sounds in the distance. Whispers, movement, the flutter of wings. "How many people live in this castle?" Elena asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "That depends on how you define life," Mrs. Kovacs replied, which was not comforting. "There is myself, the cook, 2 maids, the groundskeeper, and the master. Others come and go." "What others?" The housekeeper did not answer. They descended a grand staircase with a banister carved from dark wood. Portraits lined the walls, all depicting stern-faced aristocrats in clothing from various centuries. Elena felt their painted eyes following her as she passed. At the bottom of the stairs, they crossed a great hall with a vaulted ceiling and stained glass windows that showed scenes of battles and bloodshed. Even in the torchlight, the red glass seemed to glow with its own internal fire. Finally, they reached a set of double doors carved with images of wolves. Mrs. Kovacs pushed them open to reveal a dining hall that stole what remained of Elena's breath. The room was magnificent. A table of polished mahogany stretched down the center, long enough to seat 30 guests, but set for only 2. Candelabras blazed with dozens of candles, filling the space with golden light. The walls were hung with more tapestries, and a fire roared in a fireplace large enough to roast an ox. At the far end of the table, silhouetted against the flames, sat the man who had claimed her. Count Dracula rose as she entered, moving with a fluid grace that was not quite human. He was even more imposing than she remembered, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed now in a black suit of exquisite tailoring. His hair was pulled back from his face, revealing the sharp angles of his cheekbones and jaw. In the candlelight, he was terrifyingly beautiful, like a fallen angel painted by a master who understood both glory and damnation. "Miss Elena," he said, and his voice rolled through the room like distant thunder. "You honor me with your presence. Please sit." It was not a request. Elena walked the length of the table, acutely aware of his eyes on her, of the way he watched her every movement like a predator tracking prey. Mrs. Kovacs pulled out a chair for her at the opposite end of the table, a distance that felt both too far and not nearly far enough. The housekeeper retreated, leaving Elena alone with the monster. For a long moment, neither spoke. Dracula simply looked at her, his expression unreadable, those dark eyes reflecting candlelight like blood spilled on marble. Elena forced herself to meet his gaze, to not look away, to show no fear, even though her heart was hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. He smiled slightly as if her defiance amused him. "You are afraid of me," he observed, "yet you do not show it. That is wise. Fear is useful, but terror is paralytic." "I am not here by choice," Elena said, pleased that her voice did not shake. "You stole me from my family, from my life." "I claimed what was offered," he corrected. "The ceremony exists precisely for this purpose. Your village trades daughters for protection, and I collect what I am owed by ancient covenant." "Protection from what? From you?" His smile widened, revealing the tips of fangs. "From far worse things than me, I assure you. The mountains are full of monsters, Miss Elena. I am simply the one with the best manners." A servant appeared from the shadows, making Elena jump. The man was old and bent, moving with the shuffling gait of the ancient. He placed a covered dish before her and removed the silver dome to reveal a perfectly prepared meal. Roasted venison with vegetables and a delicate sauce that smelled divine. Another dish was placed before Dracula, but when the dome was lifted, it revealed only a crystal goblet filled with dark red liquid that Elena knew was not wine. Her stomach turned. "You drink blood." "I do," he agreed, lifting the goblet. "Just as you eat flesh. We are all predators, Miss Elena. I am simply more honest about it. There is a difference between eating animals and drinking the blood of humans." His eyebrows rose. "Who said this is human blood? I have not fed on a human in many years. Animal blood suffices, though it lacks certain qualities." She did not know whether to believe him. "Why did you choose me? There were other girls, prettier girls, wealthier girls." He took a sip from his goblet, his eyes never leaving hers. "Wealth means nothing to one who has lived as long as I have. Beauty is common, it fades, it bores me. Then what do you want with me?" He set down the goblet and leaned forward slightly. The candlelight cast shadows across his face that made him look even more inhuman. "When I looked at you at that ceremony, I saw something I have not seen in 300 years. Do you know what that was?" Elena shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Light," he said simply. "Not the false piety of priests or the performative goodness of those who seek heaven's reward. Real light, the kind that comes from a pure heart that has known suffering but has not been broken by it. The kind that can exist in darkness without being consumed. You have no idea how rare that is." She stared at him, not knowing how to respond. Was this some elaborate seduction? Some game he played before the kill? "I do not want to hurt you," he continued, as if reading her thoughts. "I want to understand you, to be near you, to see if that light remains or if proximity to me will inevitably snuff it out. And if it does remain, perhaps it can illuminate some of the darkness that has consumed me." "You want redemption," Elena said, understanding dawning. "You want me to save your soul." His laugh was bitter and cold. "My soul is beyond salvation, Miss Elena. I accepted that centuries ago. But perhaps being near one who still possesses such a thing will remind me what it felt like to be human. That is all I ask. Your company, your presence. Nothing more unless you offer it freely, and if I refuse, then you will live here as an honored guest, wanting for nothing, but forever a prisoner." He said it without emotion, as if stating a simple fact. "I cannot let you leave. The light you carry draws me like a moth to flame. I am too selfish to release you, too damned to deserve you, and too fascinated to look away." Elena felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. "You speak of my light, but you trap me in darkness. How is that not cruel?" "It is cruel," he agreed. "I am a cruel creature. I have impaled thousands, ruled with terror, fed on innocence. I am everything the stories say and worse. But for reasons I do not fully understand, I do not wish to be cruel to you. That is why I ask for your company rather than simply taking what I want. It is the closest thing to mercy I can offer." She looked down at her untouched meal, her appetite gone. "What happens if I refuse even that? If I lock myself in my room and never speak to you? Then you will be comfortable and safe and utterly alone until you die of old age or madness, whichever comes first," he said. "And I will watch from the shadows and wonder what we might have been to each other, had you been brave enough to face a monster." The challenge in his voice stung. Elena looked up sharply. "I am not a coward." "Then prove it. Dine with me. Speak with me. Get to know the creature who has claimed you. Perhaps you will find that monsters can surprise you. Or perhaps you will confirm everything you fear. Either way, at least you will know the truth." Elena picked up her fork. "Very well, Count Dracula, I will dine with you, I will speak with you, but do not mistake my compliance for surrender. I am here because I have no choice, but my soul remains my own." His smile this time was genuine, transforming his face from terrible to tragic. "Of that, Miss Elena, I have no doubt. Your soul burns too brightly to be claimed by anyone, not even by the Lord of Darkness himself." They ate in silence for a time, or rather, Elena ate while Dracula watched. Despite everything, the food was excellent and her body needed sustenance. She could feel his eyes on her, studying her, and it took all her willpower not to squirm under that intense scrutiny. "Tell me about yourself," he said finally. "Your family, your dreams. What did you hope for before I stole you away?" Elena considered refusing, but what was the point? He had already taken everything else. She might as well give him words. "My father was a coal miner until his injury. My mother takes in sewing. My sister Maria is 12 and wants to be a teacher, though we cannot afford schooling. We are poor, but honest. We go to church every Sunday. We help our neighbors. We do not steal or lie or hurt anyone. We are ordinary." "You are far from ordinary," he murmured. "But continue. What did you want for yourself?" Elena pushed food around her plate. "I wanted to marry someone kind, have children, grow old in the village surrounded by people I love. Simple things, impossible things now." "Not impossible," he said quietly, simply deferred. "I am immortal, Miss Elena, but you are not. You will age, you will die, and then you will be free of me." The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it filled her with a strange melancholy she could not explain. "You would watch me grow old and die just like that?" "I have watched empires rise and fall," he said. "I have seen thousands grow old and die. One more will not break me." But something in his voice suggested that perhaps this one would. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing with unexpected ease, once Elena's initial terror faded into wary curiosity. He was educated beyond anything she had ever encountered, speaking of history as if he had lived it, which of course he had. He spoke of battles and kings, of plagues and revolutions, of the slow march of centuries with a melancholy that was almost beautiful. And he asked about her life with genuine interest, listening as she described the simple rhythms of village life, the festivals and harvests, the small joys of a world he had long since left behind. By the time the candles had burned low, Elena realized with surprise that she had almost enjoyed herself. The monster across the table was still a monster, but he was also intelligent and articulate and strangely lonely. She could see the weight of centuries in his eyes, the accumulated grief of watching everything he touched turn to dust. When Mrs. Kovacs appeared to escort her back to her room, Elena rose with genuine reluctance. "Thank you for dinner," she said formally. "It was more pleasant than I anticipated." Dracula rose as well, inclining his head. "The first of many, I hope. Good night, Miss Elena. May you sleep peacefully, knowing you are safe within these walls." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Elena." She looked back. "Thank you for not screaming," he said softly. "Thank you for seeing me as more than just a monster. even if only for tonight. She had no answer for that, so she simply nodded and left. Back in her room, alone at last, Elena stood at the window and stared out into the darkness. Somewhere out there was her village, her family, her former life. It might as well have been on the moon. But as she climbed into the silk sheets and closed her eyes, she found herself thinking not of escape, but of the sadness in a vampire's eyes when he spoke of centuries of loneliness. And she wondered, not for the first time and not for the last, which of them was truly the prisoner here. Days passed in the castle like pages turning in a book, written in a language Elena was only beginning to understand. The routine became familiar, almost comfortable in its strangeness. She would wake in the late afternoon as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Mrs. Kovach would bring her meals and help her dress in gowns that grew progressively more beautiful. And when darkness fell completely, she would dine with the Count in that magnificent hall, their conversations stretching long into the night. He never touched her, never came closer than the length of the table between them, yet Elena felt his presence like a physical thing, a weight in the air that made her heart race and her skin prickle with awareness she did not want to name. On the 5th night, he asked if she would like to see more of the castle. "Your room is comfortable, I hope, but even the most gilded cage is still a cage. Perhaps a change of scenery would please you." Elena set down her wineglass. "I would like that," she admitted, "though I suspect you will not show me the way out." His smile was rueful. "You are correct, but there are other rooms that might interest you. I have a library that rivals any in Europe. Do you read?" "When I have the opportunity," she said. Books were expensive luxuries in her village, but the priest had taught her letters and occasionally lent her volumes from the church collection. "I enjoy stories of faraway places. Then you will appreciate what I can offer." He rose from his chair and gestured for her to follow. They left the dining hall and walked through corridors Elena had not yet seen. The castle was massive, a labyrinth of stone and shadow that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of the torchlight. Portraits watched them pass, and tapestries rippled in draughts that came from no discernible source. More than once, Elena thought she heard whispers from empty rooms, or the sound of footsteps that ceased when she turned to look. "Does anyone else live here?" she asked. "Besides the servants I have seen." "Define live," Dracula replied, which was becoming a frustratingly common answer in this place. "Are there other vampires? Other creatures?" He paused before a set of ornate doors. "There are others who visit from time to time, old companions, associates, but I generally prefer solitude. My kind does not age well in groups. We tend toward territorialism and violence. Yet you claimed me at a ceremony surrounded by others of your kind." "They are not my kind," he said with unexpected vehemence. "They are newly made, barely a century old, playing at nobility while they drain peasants and grow fat on easy prey. I am the last of the ancient ones, the original bloodline. They defer to me because they fear me as they should." He pushed open the doors, and Elena gasped. The library was breathtaking. 3 stories tall, with walls lined floor to ceiling with books, shelves stretched into shadows above, accessible by iron staircases and walkways. A massive chandelier hung from the vaulted ceiling, its crystals catching firelight from the hearth and scattering rainbows across the spines of countless volumes. The smell of old paper and leather and knowledge filled the air like incense. "This is magnificent," Elena breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "I have been collecting for 500 years, Dracula said, and there was pride in his voice. "Books in languages dead before your grandfather was born. Histories that never made it into official records. Poetry written by hands that have long since turned to dust. All of it preserved here, where time moves differently. May I?" Elena gestured toward the nearest shelf. "Of course. Everything here is yours to explore. I only ask that you handle the oldest volumes with care. Some are quite fragile." She moved to the shelves like a woman in a dream, running her fingers along leather spines embossed with gold, titles in Latin and Greek, and languages she could not identify. She pulled out a volume at random and opened it to find illustrations of plants and their medicinal properties, drawn with exquisite detail by some medieval monk. When she looked up, Dracula was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "What is it?" she asked. "You smile when you read," he said softly. Did you know that? A true smile, not the polite ones you give me at dinner. It transforms your entire face. Elena closed the book quickly, suddenly self-conscious. I did not realize. Do not stop on my account. His voice was gentle. It is a rare pleasure to see genuine joy in this place. I had forgotten what it looks like. She replaced the book and selected another. This one, a collection of French poetry. She could not read French, but the words looked beautiful on the page. Do you read all of these? I have read most, yes. When you have eternity and insomnia, you find ways to pass the time. Reading, music, contemplating the various ways your existence is a curse. There was bitterness in that last part, but also dark humor. Elena found herself almost smiling. You could end your existence if you truly wished. Sunlight, a stake through the heart. Are there not ways? There are, he agreed. I have considered them all at various points across the centuries. But I am at my core a coward. I chose immortality because I feared death, and that fear remains even after everything death has taken from me. What did it take from you? He was silent for a long moment, his face turning toward the fire. Everything, he said finally. My humanity, my family, my name. I was not always Dracula, you know. Once I had another name, another life. I was a prince, a warrior, a man who believed in God and justice and the sanctity of the soul. Then I made a choice, and all of that burned away like morning mist. What choice? He turned back to her, and his eyes were pools of ancient sorrow. To never die, no matter the cost. I was wounded in battle, dying in agony, and a creature came to me in the darkness. It offered me eternity in exchange for my soul. I accepted without hesitation. I thought I was being clever, cheating death. I did not understand that I was choosing something far worse than death. I was choosing to watch everyone I loved grow old and die, while I remained frozen, unchanging, feeding on the living to sustain an existence I no longer wanted. Elena felt unexpected sympathy rise in her chest. Have you never tried to find peace? To seek forgiveness? His laugh was hollow. Forgiveness from whom? God abandoned me the moment I made my choice. The church would burn me. And I cannot forgive myself for the things I have done. I have killed thousands, Elena. In war, in rage, in hunger. I have destroyed families and devastated villages. I am a monster in every sense of the word. There is no redemption for creatures like me. Yet you brought me here, she said quietly. You claimed me but have not harmed me. You feed on animals rather than humans. You collect books and appreciate beauty. That is not the behavior of an irredeemable monster. He stared at her as if she had struck him. Do not romanticize me, he said harshly. I am not some tragic figure awaiting salvation through a good woman's love. I am dangerous, I am damned. And your compassion, however genuine, will not change what I am. I am not trying to change you, Elena replied, meeting his intensity with her own. I am simply observing that you are more complex than you pretend to be. You wear your monstrousness like armor, but underneath, I see remnants of the man you once were. That man is dead. Is he? Then why collect books he will never have time to read? Why maintain a castle he could abandon at any moment? Why claim a village girl who offers you nothing but conversation and judgment? Dracula closed the distance between them in a movement too fast for her eyes to follow. One moment he was across the room, the next he stood directly before her, so close she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from his body. His eyes blazed with something between fury and desperation. Do you want to know why I claimed you? His voice was low, dangerous, because when I looked at you in that square, surrounded by the stench of fear and resignation, I saw something that should not exist in this world. Hope. Real, unshakable hope. And I wanted to possess it, to consume it, to understand how a fragile mortal creature could carry such light in a world as dark as this one. I wanted to tear it apart and examine it, or perhaps to simply bask in it until it inevitably burns out. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, but she did not step back. And have you succeeded? Have you torn apart my hope? No, he said, and his voice dropped to barely a whisper. That is what terrifies me. You should be broken by now, weeping, begging. But instead you stand here arguing theology with a vampire, and accusing me of hidden humanity. You are either extraordinarily brave or extraordinarily foolish." "Perhaps both," Elena said. Her voice shook slightly, but she maintained eye contact. "Or perhaps I simply refuse to give you the satisfaction of my despair." They stood frozen, inches apart. The air between them charged with something Elena had no name for. She could see the war in his eyes, the struggle between the monster that wanted to frighten her and something else, something softer and more dangerous. Then he stepped back, breaking the tension like a snapped thread. "Forgive me," he said stiffly. "I forget myself. You should return to your room. It is late." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to push further, but wisdom prevailed. "As you wish, Count Dracula." Mrs. Kovacs appeared as if summoned, though Elena had heard no bell. The housekeeper's face was carefully neutral as she led Elena back through the winding corridors to her chamber. They walked in silence until they reached the door. "You are playing a dangerous game, child," Mrs. Kovacs said softly. "The master has not been challenged in centuries. He does not know how to respond to defiance that is not accompanied by terror." "I am not playing a game," Elena replied. "I am simply trying to survive with my soul intact. Your soul is not what concerns me." The housekeeper's eyes were sad. "It is your heart I worry about. Do not make the mistake of falling in love with a creature who cannot love you back." Elena felt her cheeks flush. "I have no intention of falling in love with anyone, least of all a vampire. Intentions mean little when it comes to matters of the heart." Mrs. Kovacs opened the door. "Sleep well, miss. And remember, there are worse fates than death. Sometimes the heart kills us more thoroughly than any blade." Elena entered her room troubled and confused. She prepared for bed mechanically, her mind replaying the conversation in the library over and over. The intensity in Dracula's eyes, the way he had looked at her as if she were both salvation and damnation, the tremor in his voice when he spoke of his lost humanity. She should hate him. She should be planning escape, sharpening wooden stakes, searching for weaknesses. Instead, she found herself wondering about the man he had been before the curse. What had he looked like in sunlight? What had made him laugh? Had he loved anyone? Been loved in return? These were dangerous thoughts. Mrs. Kovacs was right about that. But as Elena lay in the darkness, listening to the wind howl around the castle towers, she could not stop them. Could not stop seeing the loneliness in those ancient eyes. Could not stop hearing the self-loathing in his voice when he called himself a monster. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps she was extraordinarily foolish. Or perhaps she thought as sleep finally claimed her, everyone deserved the chance to be seen as more than their worst mistakes, even creatures who had lived long enough to make thousands of them. The next evening, Elena woke to find a gift waiting on her bedside table. A book, leather-bound and clearly very old. She opened it carefully to find poetry written in English, the language she understood best. The pages were yellowed with age, and someone had marked certain passages with careful annotations in the margins. She read one of the marked poems, a meditation on loss and longing, and recognized in the marginalia a younger version of Dracula's handwriting. He had been mortal once when he read these words. He had felt these emotions as a human man. When she went to dinner that evening, the book was tucked under her arm. Dracula noticed immediately. "I see you found my gift," he said. "I thought you might appreciate it." The poet understood what it meant to be caught between light and darkness. "Thank you," Elena said sincerely. "I will treasure it." Something in his expression softened. Then it was worth giving. They dined and talked, and this time the conversation flowed more easily. He told her stories of his mortal life, carefully edited but revealing glimpses of the man beneath the monster. She told him about her village, her family, her small dreams that had once seemed so important. And slowly, carefully, without either of them fully acknowledging it, something shifted between them. The prisoner and her captor. The maiden and the monster. Two lonely souls finding unexpected comfort in the darkness. Outside, the moon rose over the Carpathian mountains, illuminating a world of shadow and stone. And within the castle walls, in a dining hall lit by 1,000 candles, hope flickered like a flame that refused to be extinguished, no matter how much darkness surrounded it. Mrs. Kovacs watched from the doorway and shook her head sadly. She had seen this story before in different forms across the centuries. It never ended well, but perhaps she thought just this once the ending might surprise them all. 3 weeks passed, and the castle that had seemed like a prison began to feel like something else entirely. Not home, Elena told herself firmly, but perhaps a place where she could breathe, could think, could be more than just a poor village girl waiting for life to happen to her. Dracula continued to keep his distance, never touching her beyond the occasional brush of fingers when passing a book or holding a door. Yet his presence filled her waking thoughts and haunted her dreams. She found herself looking forward to their evening meals, with an anticipation that both thrilled and terrified her. He was teaching her things, not intentionally perhaps, but through their conversations she learned about art and music, about philosophy and science, about the vast complexity of a world she had only glimpsed from the confines of her village. He spoke several languages fluently, and was teaching her French through the poetry they read together in the library. "You have a natural ear for language," he told her one evening as they sat in high-backed chairs before the library fire. She had just successfully translated a particularly complex verse. With proper education, you could have been a scholar. "Women in my village do not become scholars," Elena said. "We become wives and mothers if we are fortunate, servants or spinsters if we are not. Your village has very limited imagination." He turned a page in his own book, a massive tome written in what appeared to be ancient Greek. "You have a mind that hungers for knowledge. It is criminal to waste such a thing on domestic drudgery." Elena set down her book and looked at him directly. "Is that why you claimed me? To educate me, to save me from a life of drudgery?" He was silent for a long moment, his eyes on the fire. "I claimed you because I am selfish," he said finally. "Because in 500 years of existence I have never met anyone who made me want to be better than what I am. Because when I look at you, I remember what it felt like to believe in goodness. And because I am too much of a coward to let you go, even knowing that keeping you here is an act of cruelty. It does not feel cruel anymore," Helena admitted softly. "Is that worse? That I am growing comfortable in this cage?" He looked at her then, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. "Yes," he said, "that is infinitely worse, because it means I am corrupting you slowly rather than quickly. I'm teaching you to accept captivity, to find contentment in limitation. That is a far more insidious evil than simple violence." "Then let me go." "I cannot." "Why not?" "Because I am a monster, and monsters are selfish creatures." He stood abruptly and moved to the window, his back to her. "I have taken cities and destroyed armies. I have built an empire on fear and blood. But you are the first thing in centuries that I have wanted without also wanting to destroy. Do you understand how dangerous that makes you? How dangerous I am to you?" Elena rose and crossed the room before wisdom could stop her. She stood behind him, close enough to feel the cold emanating from his body, close enough to see her reflection in the dark window glass, standing beside his. "You have not hurt me," she said. "In all these weeks you have shown me nothing but respect and kindness. You feed me and educate me and engage me as an equal. If you are a monster, you are the strangest monster I have ever heard of." "Because you bring out something in me I thought was dead," he said, his voice rough. "Something human, something that remembers honor and restraint. But it is a thin veneer, Elena. Beneath it I am still what I have always been, a predator, a killer, a creature of endless hunger. Then why do you fight it? Why not simply take what you want?" He turned to face her, and she saw the struggle etched in every line of his face. "Because you deserve better than to be prey. Because despite everything I have become, some small part of me still remembers what it means to care about someone other than myself. And because if I hurt you, I will have proven that there is truly nothing left worth saving in this cursed existence." They stood inches apart, the air between them electric with tension. Elena's heart hammered so loudly she was certain he could hear it. His eyes dropped to her throat, and she saw his jaw clench, saw the effort it took for him to maintain control. "You should go," he said hoarsely. "Now, before I do something we will both regret." Elena knew he was right, knew she should flee back to her room and lock the door, and remember that he was a vampire and she was human, and nothing good could come from the attraction building between them. But she had never been good at doing the sensible thing. "What if I do not want to go?" she whispered. His eyes snapped to hers, blazing with hunger and longing and desperate restraint. "Do not play games with me, Elena. You do not understand what you are offering." "I am not offering anything," she said. "I am simply stating that I am not afraid of you. Not anymore. You should be. Perhaps. But I am not." For a moment she thought he might reach for her, thought he might close that final distance and show her exactly what kind of monster he truly was. But instead, he stepped back, putting the length of the room between them. "You are trying to save me," he said, and it sounded like an accusation. "You look at me and see something redeemable. But I am not a fairy tale beast waiting for a maiden's kiss to break the curse. There is no magic that can undo what I have become. I do not want to change you," Elena said. "I simply want to understand you. Why? What does it matter to you whether a monster has feelings or regrets?" "Because everyone deserves to be seen," she said simply. "Everyone deserves to have at least one person in the world who knows who they truly are and does not turn away. Even monsters, especially monsters." He stared at her as if she had spoken in a language he could not comprehend. Then he laughed, a broken sound that was more pain than humor. "You are going to destroy me," he said, "not with stakes or sunlight or holy water, with compassion, with understanding, with this maddening refusal to hate me the way I deserve to be hated. Is that so terrible?" "Yes, because when you finally do leave me, when age or illness or simple human mortality takes you away, I will be left with the memory of what it felt like to be seen as something other than a monster. And that will be a far more exquisite torture than anything I have endured in 5 centuries. Elena felt tears prick her eyes at the raw despair in his voice. "I'm not trying to torture you." "I know. That is what makes it worse." He moved to the door. "I bid you good night, Elena. Sleep well." He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone in the vast library with only the crackling fire for company. Elena remained standing where he had left her, her mind reeling. When had this happened? When had the monster become a man in her eyes? When had fear transformed into something far more complicated and infinitely more dangerous? Mrs. Kovacs found her there an hour later, still staring at the empty doorway. "Come, child," the housekeeper said gently. "It is time for bed." As they walked back through the corridors, Elena found her voice. "How long have you served him?" 20 years, as I told you. "And in all that time, have you ever seen him care for anyone?" Mrs. Kovacs was quiet for several steps. "Once," she said finally, "long before my time, there was a woman, the master's wife, when he was still mortal. She died in childbirth along with their son. Some say that was when the darkness truly claimed him, when grief opened the door for the curse to enter. He never speaks of them. He speaks of very little that matters." The housekeeper stopped outside Elena's door. "But I have served him long enough to recognize the signs. He is beginning to care for you, Miss Elena, perhaps more than he has cared for anyone since his mortal life ended. That should terrify you. Why? Because his love is as dangerous as his hate, perhaps more so. He does not know how to love without consuming, without possessing, without destroying what he cherishes most. It is the nature of what he is." Elena opened her door but paused before entering. What if he could learn? What if someone taught him? Mrs. Kovacs' expression was infinitely sad. Then that someone would have to be willing to risk everything, including their own soul. Is that a price you are prepared to pay? Elena had no answer. She bid the housekeeper good night and closed the door, but sleep eluded her for hours. She lay in the darkness, listening to the wind howl around the castle towers, and thought about monsters and men and the thin line between them. She thought about the loneliness in Dracula's eyes when he spoke of centuries alone, the tenderness in his voice when he taught her French, the desperate restraint he showed every time she came near. He was fighting himself, fighting his nature, fighting the hunger that must be a constant torment. For her, because she had shown him kindness, because she had refused to see him as only a monster. Was that enough? Could compassion really reach something as lost as a 500-year-old vampire? Or was she being a fool, romanticizing a predator who would eventually tire of restraint and show her exactly what he was capable of? She did not know. But as dawn approached and exhaustion finally claimed her, Elena realized something that should have frightened her far more than it did. She wanted to find out. The next evening she woke to find another gift on her bedside table. Not a book this time, but a single white rose in a crystal vase. The bloom was perfect, impossibly fresh despite the late season and the cold climate. A note lay beside it, in Dracula's elegant script. "Forgive my harshness last night. You deserve gentleness, not the bitter confessions of a damned creature. I hope you will still join me for dinner, though I would understand if you chose to dine alone." Elena held the rose carefully, breathing in its sweet scent. Then she dressed in a gown of deep crimson and made her way to the dining hall. Dracula was already there, standing by the fire with his back to the door. He turned when she entered, and relief flooded his features so openly that her heart ached. "You came," he said. "Did you think I would not? I thought I might have frightened you away. I am not accustomed to controlling my emotions. Immortality makes one careless with words." Elena took her seat at the table. "You were honest. I appreciate honesty, even when it is painful." He sat as well, though he did not immediately reach for his goblet. "I owe you an apology," he said, "and an explanation. I have lived so long alone that I have forgotten how to be with another person, without either dominating them or driving them away. You confuse me, Elena. You make me want things I have no right to want, and I do not know how to navigate that without causing harm." "What do you want?" Elena asked softly. His eyes met hers across the table. "To hear you laugh, to watch you discover new ideas, to protect you from every dark thing in this world, including myself, to have your company for as long as you will grant it, to be worthy of the light you carry, though I know I never will be." Elena's throat tightened. "Those are not monstrous desires. They are when they come from a monster." He lifted his goblet at last. "But perhaps for tonight, we can pretend otherwise. Tell me what you were reading today." And so they spoke of books and poetry and philosophy. The tension from the previous night gradually easing into something that felt almost like friendship, almost like something more. Outside, snow began to fall on the Carpathian Mountains, the first of the season. Winter was coming, and with it, Elena knew, would come difficult choices. She could not remain in this castle forever, suspended in this strange existence between captivity and companionship. Eventually, she would have to decide what she truly wanted. But for now, for tonight, she let herself simply be present. To enjoy the company of a complicated, damaged, impossibly old creature who looked at her as if she were the only real thing in his entire existence. And if her heart was beginning to betray her better judgment, well, she would worry about that when the time came. The time, she suspected, was coming sooner than she thought. Winter descended on Castle Dracula with fierce beauty. Snow blanketed the mountains and courtyards, transforming the Gothic fortress into something from a dark fairy tale. Elena watched the transformation from her window each evening as she woke, marveling at how something so cold could be so breathtaking. 6 weeks had passed since the mating ceremony. 6 weeks of dinners and conversations and stolen moments in the library. 6 weeks of watching a monster slowly become a man in her eyes, or perhaps of watching a man emerge from beneath centuries of monstrous behavior, and 6 weeks of fighting the truth that grew more undeniable with each passing night. She was falling in love with him. It was madness, it was foolishness beyond measure, it was everything Mrs. Kovacs had warned her against. Yet Elena could no more stop her heart than she could stop the snow from falling or the sun from setting. She saw it in the small gestures he made, the way he remembered how she liked her tea, the books he selected specifically for her interests, the careful distance he maintained even as his eyes followed her with barely concealed hunger. He was a creature of darkness, fighting against his own nature, and he was doing it for her. That night at dinner she found him unusually quiet. He sat at his end of the table, his goblet untouched, his expression distant and troubled. "What troubles you?" Elena asked after their meal had been served. He was silent for a long moment, then sighed. "There is news from your village. Your father's condition has worsened. The injury to his leg has become infected. The village doctor fears he may not survive the winter." Elena's fork clattered to her plate. No, that cannot be. He was healing. Mother said he was getting better. She lied to protect you from worry. Dracula's voice was gentle. "I have had my servants monitoring the situation. Your father needs treatment that the village cannot provide. Surgery, medicine, care that requires resources your family does not possess. Then I must go to him." Elena stood, her chair scraping against the stone floor. "I must return home immediately. Please, I know I am your prisoner, but he is my father. Let me say goodbye at least. Sit down, Elena." Something in his tone made her obey. She sank back into her chair, tears already streaming down her face. Dracula rose and moved around the table, closing the distance between them for the first time in weeks. He knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to her eye level, and took her hand in both of his. His touch was cold but gentle. "I am not a good man," he said quietly. "I have done terrible things, and will likely do more before my existence ends. But I am not so far gone that I would keep you from your dying father. You will go to him, tonight. My carriage will take you, and you will have gold enough to hire the finest doctors in Transylvania." Elena stared at him through her tears. "You are letting me go? I am letting you choose." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Go to your father. Save him if you can. Stay with your family if that is what you wish. The choice is yours. And if I choose to return." Something flickered in his eyes, hope and fear and desperate longing all at once. "Then you will be welcomed as an honored guest, not a prisoner. But Elena, understand what I am offering you. Freedom, your old life, everything you lost when I claimed you. Do not throw that away out of misplaced gratitude or confusion. Is that what you think this is?" Elena wiped her tears with her free hand. "Gratitude? I do not know what this is," he admitted. "I only know that I cannot keep you here through coercion any longer. You deserve the right to choose your own path, even if that path leads away from me." Elena looked at their joined hands, his pale fingers intertwined with her warm ones. A vampire and a mortal, a monster and a maiden, an impossible pairing that should never have existed. Yet here they were. "I will go to my father," she said. "I will do everything I can to save him. But Dracula, I need you to promise me something, anything, wait for me. Do not assume I am leaving forever. Do not close yourself off or convince yourself that I will never return. Give me time to help my family, and then let me decide with a clear mind what I truly want." He brought her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, so gentle it made her heart ache. "I will wait as long as necessary. I have eternity, after all. What is one human lifetime compared to that?" But they both heard the lie in his words. They both knew that if she left and never returned, he would not simply wait. He would retreat back into the darkness, back into the monster he had been before she showed him another way. Mrs. Kovacs appeared with a fur-lined cloak and travelling clothes. "The carriage is ready, miss. We must leave soon if you are to reach the village before dawn." Helena changed quickly, her mind racing. The gown of crimson velvet was replaced with practical wool and boots. The castle finery was exchanged for village simplicity. But as she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. 6 weeks had changed her in ways that went beyond clothing. Dracula waited for her at the castle entrance, standing beside an ornate black carriage pulled by 4 midnight horses. Snow fell around him, catching in his dark hair like stars. He looked like something from a painting, beautiful and terrible and heartbreakingly alone. He handed her a leather purse heavy with gold coins. "For the doctors," he said, "for your family, whatever is needed. Do not let money be the reason your father dies." Elena took the purse, then surprised herself by reaching up to touch his face. His skin was cold beneath her palm, but he leaned into her touch like a man starved for warmth. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "Come back to me," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. "Please, Elena, come back." She could not promise that, could not make vows she might not be able to keep. So, instead, she stood on her toes and pressed a kiss to his cheek, quick and chaste and full of everything she could not say aloud. Then she climbed into the carriage, and the door closed, and the horses pulled her away from Castle Dracula and back toward the mortal world. The journey took hours, the carriage racing through snow-covered mountains and dark forests. Elena sat wrapped in the fur cloak, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. Relief that she would see her family, terror that she might be too late, and beneath it all, an ache in her chest that grew with every mile that separated her from the castle, from him. Dawn was breaking when the carriage finally stopped at the edge of her village. The driver, an old man who had not spoken the entire journey, helped her down and then departed without a word, the carriage vanishing into the morning mist like something from a dream. Elena ran through the familiar streets, her boots slipping on icy cobblestones. Neighbors stared from windows, shocked to see her alive and well. She ignored them all, her focus solely on the modest cottage at the edge of the square. She burst through the door to find her mother kneeling beside her father's bed, praying. Maria looked up from where she sat in the corner, her young face streaked with tears. "Elena," her mother gasped, rising to her feet. "We thought we would never see you again. We thought the vampire had killed you." Elena rushed to her father's side. He was unconscious, his skin grey and clammy, his breathing shallow. The smell of infection hung heavy in the air. "He is dying," she said. "The doctor says there is nothing more to be done," her mother whispered. "We have no money for better treatment. We have been praying for a miracle." Elena pulled out the leather purse and poured its contents onto the table. Gold coins spilled across the scarred wood, more wealth than her family had seen in their entire lives. "Get the doctor from Brasov," she commanded. "The surgeon. The one they say can save anyone. Pay him whatever he asks." Her mother stared at the gold in disbelief. "Where did you get this?" "From Count Dracula." Elena knelt beside her father and took his fevered hand. "He let me go. He gave me this to save Papa." Maria approached cautiously. "Is the Count truly as terrible as they say?" Elena thought of dark eyes filled with loneliness, of gentle hands that never touched her without permission, of a monster who fought his own nature because she had asked him to. "No," she said softly. "He is not terrible, he is broken. There is a difference." Her mother dispatched Maria to fetch the doctor, and Elena remained by her father's side, holding his hand and praying to a God she was no longer certain was listening. The hours crawled by in agonizing slowness. The surgeon arrived by midday, a stern man with capable hands and no patience for sentiment. He examined her father, declared the situation dire but not hopeless, and set to work. Elena was banished from the room while he operated, left to pace the main room while her mother and sister clung to each other and wept. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of not knowing. 3 hours of bargaining with God and fate and anyone who might be listening. 3 hours of realizing that she could lose her father, and that even the gold from a vampire might not be enough to save him. When the surgeon finally emerged, his hands bloodied and his expression exhausted, Elena could barely breathe. "He will live," the man said. "The infection was deep, and he has lost part of the leg. But he will live. He will need care and rest, but he should recover." Elena collapsed into a chair, relief flooding through her so powerfully she thought she might faint. Her mother wept openly, and Maria threw her arms around Elena, sobbing into her shoulder. "Thank you," Elena whispered to the surgeon. "Thank you, thank whoever provided the gold," he replied pragmatically. "Without it, your father would be dead by nightfall." He accepted his payment and departed, leaving instructions for care and promising to return in a week to check on his patient. That night, with her father sleeping peacefully and out of danger, Elena sat by the fire with her mother and sister. They wanted to know everything about the castle, about the Count, about her captivity. She told them a version of the truth, that he had treated her well, that he had educated her, that he had let her go when her father needed her. She did not tell them about the conversations that stretched until dawn, about the way he looked at her, as if she were salvation itself, about the feelings growing in her heart that made no logical sense, but felt more real than anything she had ever experienced. "Will you go back?" her mother asked quietly. Elena stared into the flames. "I do not know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to stay here, to be with you and Papa and Maria, to return to the life I knew. And the other part? The other part of me knows that I left something important in that castle, something I may never find anywhere else." Her mother reached over and took her hand. "Love makes fools of us all, child, even when the beloved is impossible, especially then." Elena looked at her mother in surprise. "You understand? I was young once, too. I know what it is like to feel drawn to something dangerous, something that everyone says you should fear. Her mother's eyes were sad. But Elena, you must be careful. Vampires cannot love the way mortals do. They consume, they possess, they destroy what they cherish. That is their nature. He has fought his nature every day since I met him, Elena said. He could have hurt me 1,000 times. He never did. Because he cares for you, her mother replied. And that may be the most dangerous thing of all. What happens when caring is not enough? When the hunger becomes too strong? When his darkness overwhelms your light? I do not know, Elena whispered. But I think I need to find out. She stayed with her family for 2 weeks, helping care for her father as he recovered. Each day he grew stronger, the color returning to his face, the infection receding. The surgeon returned and declared himself satisfied with the progress. Her father would never walk without a cane, but he would walk. He would live. At night, Elena lay in her old bed in the room she shared with Maria and stared at the ceiling. She thought about the castle and its vast library, about dinners by candlelight and conversations that made her feel alive in ways she had never imagined, about a man who was not a man anymore, but who tried so desperately hard to be one when he was with her. She thought about love and impossibility, and whether the two could exist together. On the 15th night she made her decision. She told her family at breakfast, and they did not seem surprised. Her father, still weak but clear-eyed, simply nodded. You have always had a kind heart, Elena. Too kind, perhaps. But it is your heart. You must follow where it leads. Her mother wept but did not argue. Maria made her promise to visit when she could. That evening, as the sun set and the first stars appeared, Elena stood at the edge of the village wrapped in the fur cloak. She did not know if Dracula would send the carriage, did not know if he had waited or if he had already closed himself off, convinced she would never return. But as darkness fell complete, she heard the sound of horses. The black carriage emerged from the forest like a shadow given form. It stopped before her, and the door opened as if by invisible hands. Elena climbed inside and did not look back. The journey to the castle felt both endless and far too short. Her heart hammered with anticipation and fear, and something that felt dangerously like joy. She did not know what she would say to him, did not know what he would say to her. But she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that she was exactly where she needed to be. The carriage stopped in the castle courtyard. Snow was falling again, thick and beautiful. Elena stepped out and looked up at the towering walls, the dark windows, the Gothic grandeur that had once terrified her, and now felt like coming home. He was there, standing at the top of the stairs as if he had been waiting every night for her return. He wore black as always, his dark hair loose around his shoulders, his face a study in careful neutrality. But his eyes, those ancient, terrible, beautiful eyes, blazed with emotion too powerful to hide. Elena climbed the stairs slowly, her breath misting in the cold air. They stood facing each other, neither speaking, the weight of 2 weeks apart heavy between them. You came back, he said finally, and his voice was rough with disbelief. I came back, Elena confirmed. Your father. He lives, he will recover. She stepped closer. Thank you for the gold. Thank you for letting me go. Thank you for waiting. I would have waited forever. He reached out as if to touch her face, then stopped himself, his hand hovering in the air between them. Elena, I need to tell you something before you enter this castle again. Before you make any choice you cannot take back. She waited, holding her breath. I am in love with you, he said, and the words seemed torn from somewhere deep in his chest. I, who have not loved anything in 5 centuries, I who am damned and cursed and everything good in this world should fear. I love you with whatever broken pieces of my soul remain, and that makes you more endangered now than you ever were before. Elena felt tears slide down her cheeks, but she was smiling. I know, she whispered. I am terrified. You are a vampire, and I am mortal, and this cannot possibly end well for either of us. Then why did you return? Because I love you too. Despite all logic and reason and common sense, I love you, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it, even if that life is shorter or stranger or more dangerous than it might have been. He stared at her as if she were a miracle he could not quite believe in. Then, with infinite slowness, He cupped her face in both hands. His touch was cold, but she leaned into it, her eyes closing at the tenderness in the gesture. "I will hurt you eventually," he said. "It is what monsters do. Then I will hurt you back. That is what love does." Her eyes opened, meeting his. "We will figure it out together. The impossible, complicated, terrifying thing between us. We will make it work or we will fail spectacularly, but at least we will do it honestly. You are the bravest woman I have ever known." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "The most foolish, the most beautiful. Then kiss me, you impossible man, and stop listing my qualities." He laughed, the sound rich and genuine and filled with so much joy it made her heart ache. Then he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost chaste, as if he feared breaking her with his hunger. But Elena pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt, and the kiss deepened. It was cold fire and sweet darkness, passion tempered by tenderness, hunger balanced by care. It was everything she had imagined, and nothing she could have anticipated. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard despite only one of them needing air, Dracula pressed his forehead to hers. "I do not deserve you," he whispered. "No," Elena agreed, "but I am yours anyway, irrevocably, impossibly, completely." "And I am yours," he replied, "for as long as you live, for as long as you will have me. I swear it." They stood together in the falling snow, a vampire and the woman who loved him, and the impossibility of it all faded in the face of the truth they had both been fighting. Some loves were destined to be tragic. Some were doomed from the start. Some burned too bright and consumed everything in their path. But some loves, the rarest kind, were strong enough to bring light to the darkest places, to find humanity in monsters, to prove that redemption was possible even for those who thought themselves beyond saving. And as Dracula led Elena into the castle, their hands clasped together, the snow-covered mountains bore silent witness to the beginning of something that should never have existed but did. A love that would test them both. A love that would demand everything. A love that was worth fighting for, even when the world said it was impossible. Especially then. In the library that night, curled together before the fire with books scattered around them, Elena looked up at the man who held her and asked, "What happens now?" Dracula smiled, and for the first time in centuries, it was a smile without shadows. "Now we live," he said simply, "however we can, for as long as we have. That is all anyone can do." "Even monsters?" Elena teased gently. "Especially monsters," he replied, "when they are fortunate enough to be loved by women, brave enough to see past the fangs." They talked until dawn crept toward the mountains. They made no promises they could not keep. They did not pretend that love would solve everything, or that their path would be easy. But they chose each other anyway, the maiden and the monster, the light and the darkness. Two impossible souls finding solace in the space between damnation and redemption. And if their love was destined to be a tragedy, then at least it would be a tragedy of their own making. At least they would face it together. In Castle Dracula, where shadows whispered and darkness reigned, a single candle burned through the approaching dawn. And for the first time in 500 years, Count Dracula watched the sun rise without flinching from its light, because beside him sat a woman who had taught him that even monsters could learn to hope. Even vampires could remember what it meant to be human. Even the damned could find something worth living for. And love, however impossible, however brief, however doomed, was always worth the cost. Always.